When we talk about the great combinations of our time, those things that are just meant to be together, what we're talking about? We're talking about rum and raisin, we're talking about cookies and cream, we're talking about Zimmer and Nolan. And I think out of all the great Zimmer and Nolan combinations, Interstellar sits at the peak. Zimmer receives a letter on a piece of thick card. It describes the relationship between a father and son. It's sort of a bit of a fable. The letter was from Christopher Nolan. Zimmer didn't know it yet, but what he was about to write would be the foundation of the Interstellar soundtrack. Nolan asked for a day of Zimmer's time to write whatever came to his mind in relation to the letter. What he wrote was essentially the track Day One.
So Chris comes down and he sits down on my couch and I say, hey, let me play it to you. And I play it and we get to the end of it and I'm going, so what do you think? And he goes, suppose I better make the movie now. And I'm going, what is the movie? And he starts talking about space and spaceships and time and love and all these things. And I say to him, but what I wrote you is just this tiny little love letter to my son. And he says, yes, but I now know where the heart of the story is.
What Nolan had done was provide no context about the genre or scale of the project he had in mind. This manufactured a situation where Zimmer was free of any pressure to create a soundtrack that captured the vastness of space, and also free to think outside of the conventions of the sci-fi genre. The resulting piece is therefore perhaps more intimate than other soundtracks of the same genre because its foundation was based on the relationship between a father and son with no reference to the cosmos. We could say that Nolan hid the truth of the film from Zimmer in order to discover the film's truth for himself. What this little trick from Nolan also did was get the ball rolling for Hans Zimmer, a man who knows the difficulties of starting a project.
There is a struggle. There's a blank page and the fear that comes with the blank page and all the demons that sit on your shoulder and tell you you're no good and you should just quit and you should phone the director now and just tell him you can't do it.
After devising the foundation, Zimmer continued to work on the soundtrack whilst Nolan was away filming it.
He's in Iceland shooting, I'm in London in my apartment. I literally locked myself away from the world. I wouldn't come out like the astronauts. I had left the Earth.
Zimmer has a complete version of the soundtrack that is made using a sampled organ, and the studios seem pretty happy with it. They're thinking, right, let's get this released. But for Zimmer, it was time to actually go to church. The studio was initially hesitant to take the presumably time-consuming journey to Temple Church in London to play on their 1926 organ, but both Zimmer and Nolan insisted on it.
We heard something in our head that we had to go to London for. We had to go and work with these musicians. We had to have these experiments.
Hans did actually joke at the time that they could just bring the instrument to him. The joke being that the church the organ is housed within is actually part of the instrument. It's actually quite funny. But it turned out that after having travelled all that way, the organ was actually quite difficult to play.
I sort of said to Chris, I think this thing is actually unplayable. We sort of agreed on a compromise that if we came back with just a few really great notes, we would have fulfilled our own personal mandate.
The pair were about to leave with just a scattering of real-life organ recordings, but this is where we meet the hero of our story, Roger Sayer, a humble but extremely capable organist. Here he is talking about how he somewhat fell into the role.
I was not the person he looked for. He was looking for an organ in London, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. He was not looking for me at all. As some people think, what was it like with Hans Zimmer looking for you? That wasn't true, and the worst part of all this is I'd never even heard of Hans Zimmer in 2014, and I had to ask my son and my daughter if I should take this seriously.
So off Roger went, breathing life into the notes that Zimmer had written in the most literal sense.
What I will say is that none of us knew what we were recording for. The whole Interstellar thing was a big secret. It was called Flora's Letter. It was not called Interstellar because Flora's Letter is the letter that Christopher Nolan wrote to Hans Zimmer, which enabled him to write the small piece that gave Christopher Nolan the opportunity to say, I'm going to make the film now, and that's the stay theme.
So that's the story of the Interstellar soundtrack. And my favourite part of the story, and the part I'm going to end on, is the fact that Roger Sayer is currently on a world tour, playing the soundtrack on various organs across the globe. Why not keep your eyes peeled and see if he's coming near you?